And today we're looking at sort of it's an interesting um, topic. We're looking at the idea of skepticism and how, uh, skepticism can be a pretty challenging thing. And we're going to see that directly addressed here in what we're looking at today. So the context of today's story, it's again looking at sort of part two of what we looked at yesterday. So we have this story of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It's there in the middle of the garden. People can see it, but they're not to eat from it. In other words, they're not to try to determine themselves about how to make the world all good, all evil, all that stuff, which gets totally upside down, and how we are to decide between good and evil, obviously, but we're to come from God's perspective on that, not trying to do it ourselves. That's for sure. And so the story goes on. Adam and Eve. Eve gets tempted by the serpent. Probably many of you are aware of this story. She eats a piece of fruit. She gives it to Adam. And then this will eventually entail them being kicked out of the Garden of Eden. And we don't view this as like male and female. We view this as sort of our story. This is how our lives evolve. And we get to a time where that selfhood that was beautiful. And what happens is that then we take it too far, really believing that we can run the entire world. And I think back to the assurity of when we're in our late teens, and we're pretty sure we know it all. And we're pretty sure if everybody just followed what we thought, that somehow the world would be better, which is not true. So you can see, folks, how that can play out. And today there's a little bit of biblical humor. So God calls them on this. God says, "All right, you ate of the tree, right?" And Adam has this beautiful, sort of very funny statement here, which is so human. Again, and you have to, folks, remember this is written thousands of years ago, and that's one of the beautiful parts of the Bible is we're talking the human experience thousands of years ago, and we read it, and it's just like, oh yeah, this is totally the modern human being. There's parts of the Bible that aren't that way. This is one part that is, and this is what Adam said to God: "The woman whom you gave to to be with me, she gave me from the tree and I ate." So it's like, man, Adam just has pushed all accountability out there as far as he can go. So he sort of has created 2 degrees of separation. First off, he's saying, look, you made her, you made this woman, and then you gave her to me, and then she actually gave me the fruit. So it's not only her fault, it's your fault for giving her to me. To me, just that's so human. That's so human, where we push off all responsibility, all accountability when we're caught sort of with our hands in the cookie jar, so to speak. Just bad stuff, bad stuff. And we do that all the time, even rejecting certain parts of our blaming it on, like, well, that's just the way I am, and that's sort of the same thing. God made me that way. I don't have a choice. Well, yeah, yes and no. Be really careful with those kind of statements. Be really careful with that kind of statement about blame. So, folks, how does this go on? Like, how does this work? Well, Manuel Swedenborg talks a lot about, sort of in a midrashic way, which is Jewish for kind of internal sense. He talks about what does this mean, and he writes a pretty interesting theology around this. And what he writes is he talks about how we justify our skepticism. So justified skepticism. And you can kind of, boy, that's what this story smells like, with that kind of reaction, this justified skepticism out there in the world, where there's lots of blame. That the primary response is not accountability. The primary response is blame, and how to put blame out there so that we keep ourselves away from it all. Now, again, remember, this is part of the story. I mean, this isn't necessarily a good part, but it's what we do as human beings, and that's real important. This is not about a guilt trip. This is just saying this is what human beings do: is we have a challenging time with accountability, and that's a long, 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 long life journey. So we don't want to be accountable, and we want to push the blame out there onto other people. And that creates sort of what in our mind is a quote unquote justified skepticism about the world. This skepticism is deeply dangerous. So, folks, just think for a minute. Let's just get a little breath with this, right? So let's think through the implications of this. If you take for yourself right now, put in your mind an area where you tend to bend towards skepticism, and I definitely have those areas. I'm sure you do. Sure you do as well. Just think of those areas you bend towards skepticism. All right, here's this area. Now, just take that arena, that area, and just start to trace it out and think that skepticism, if I lived there 24/7, what would the rest of today look like? What would tomorrow look like? What would this weekend look like if I lived purely within that skepticism? Just think about the implications of that. I don't know a lot of people would be like, "It would be the best weekend ever. Skepticism, here we come." We know that it doesn't lead anywhere good, especially when it's quote unquote justified. We got a racket in our head that says, "Oh yeah, this is totally okay." So we have to get rid of that, folks. And when we have to remember as we do, as we push it aside, like part of the challenge with skepticism is that it oftentimes does have a grain of truth in it. And I was just thinking about it this morning. A quote that is really good is even a stopped clock tells the right time twice a day. And I sort of look at that as skeptics, right? Yeah, sure. A skeptic on occasion, sure, will say the right thing at the right time, and it'll be quote unquote the right way to see a particular situation. It may be the right way to see a situation in a particular time. It is no way to live. You cannot live as an eternal skeptic, and you certainly can't live if you're spending a lot of your mental energy trying to justify your skepticism, or for me trying to justify my skepticism. We have to move beyond that, because folks, just imagine that. So let's think of a weekend without that skepticism, and just think of that area where you're skeptical, and think of its opposite. Where are you most hopeful? And imagine today lived into that hope. Imagine the way tomorrow would look lived into that hope. And imagine the way the weekend would look lived into that hope. Now, again, with that hope, it doesn't mean all those things we hope for come to pass. That's not what hope is about. Hope is love stretching into the future. But it definitely creates a better weekend than skepticism. So this weekend, folks, let's think about stepping away from skepticism. Let's think about stepping away from it, and let's think about stepping into something else. Let's think about what it looks like to step into hope, and to step in where we need to step into accountability, to step into, like, for lack of a better word, it's how do we step into beauty this weekend? Because there's always these opportunities to be the justified skeptic. And I would tell you, folks, it's a temptation. Very few things get built by skeptical people. Very little grace is out there in the world via skepticism. Very little hope is out there in the world via skepticism. And where you're struggling with that, where I'm struggling with that, let's just have a weekend where together we're trying to do something a little bit different. So that's my thought for today, folks, on how we can step away from skepticism. And what we're going to do now what we're going to do is we're going to listen to a prayer bell. After that, we're going to do a little prayer. We're going to do a little blessing, and then we'll say hi to folks on social media. So with that, friends, let's get a little breath. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know that I. Be still and know that. Be still and know. Be still and be still. Be. Our Father, who art in the heavens, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so upon the earth. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you, bring you peace, and bring you home. Amen. All right, friends. So let's give a little hello to folks here. And again, wishing everyone nothing but just an incredibly beautiful weekend. And yeah, and what's exciting news for me is I get to meet my granddaughter face to face for the first time today, which I'm definitely looking forward to. All right, so let's say hi. right. The devil made me do it. Right, Cherry. And it's like you gotta love that, right? That is the complete human response. Oh, so good. These days, Paige, right? These days, it's always someone else's fault, and it is such an easy thing to do. And I was thinking a little bit, Paige. The idea of a martyr is this great definition of martyrdom. Somebody who's playing the martyr is playing both the hero and the victim at the same time. Like there's one to be aware of. Susan, good morning to you, my friend. Hope you're doing well. Rita, good to hear you today. Well, good to see you joining us today, my friend. Um, Marcus writes, good morning, and good morning to you, buddy. Sherry, good morning, and I like that little prayer. Teresa writes, what a freeing message. Thank you. It really is. He said, I love that line, right? Justified skepticism. I think, oh my goodness, it's a very different world when we live. We live in a different place than that. Jean writes, good morning, Jean, and I hope that sunshine means you're all sunny down there in Maryland. Mary writes, if I live continually in skepticism, I remain stuck and imprisoned even more so than the person who I'm projecting blame. Ooh, that's good. Accountability asks me for movement, action going forward. I do get to choose, even though I often forget that. We remind each other of that choice and grace and connection. Boy, Mary, that is just phenomenally well said. Susan, boy, that's a big point. Skepticism smothers faith, and I actually made a little note of that, and I didn't even say that, but it does. You can't have this faith. Yesterday we talked about sort of faith and trust, and how God really really needs that trust and really needs that faith. And that's so much part of our life. And you're right. Skepticism totally smothers it. I love that phrase, smothers. Good comment there. Skepticism is a downward spiral. Thank you for offering a healthier alternative. So happy you get to see Lumi. Well, so am I. I am absolutely thrilled to be able to see my granddaughter. Just spent 3 days in quarantine, so I can, and I'm super excited. And Terry writes, Terry, exactly what I needed to hear this morning. Thank you. Well, you are welcome, Terry, and thank you so much for joining us this morning. So, folks, God bless. Wishing you all the best. May you have a weekend where you step away from skepticism and into grace and hope and a lot of love. Take care, friends. Bye-bye.